This is an ABC podcast.
Good morning and welcome to AM. I'm Sabra Lane. On this Anzac Day, Australians flocked to the dawn service at Gallipoli despite security concerns in the lead up to the event. Hopes for a memorial park for the victims of the Bali bombing fade, with construction of a 5-storey restaurant on the vacant site where the Sari Club once stood set to begin within a fortnight. And they're welcoming a long overdue visitor in southwestern Queensland. Saturating rain has come to a drought-struck country.
Yeah, it's getting a bit bleak. There's an ultralight here at the station, so I actually got to see it from the air. Just an ocean of water. It's certainly an impressive sight, that one.
Turkish authorities say they've arrested a 25-year-old man who was planning an attack on the Anzac service at Gallipoli. Authorities have told the ABC that he was preparing bombs in retaliation for the Christchurch mosque killings last month. The service was already under a cloud when the Turkish president recently suggested that any anti-Muslim visitors would be sent back in coffins. Yet despite this, operators say Australians have turned out for the dawn service. Eleanor Whitehead has more.
Tensions ahead of today's Gallipoli commemorations have been rising for weeks, but Australian pilgrims have still flocked to Anzac Cove.
It's certainly one of those bucket list things to do for a lot of people, especially those who have a connection.
Dennis Basham is Global Head of Sales for On The Go Tours. He says its clients are unfazed by threatening comments from Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan.
From our point of view, it didn't affect our business. We were interested to see whether we were going to then get, requests for cancellations to see if anyone had decided not to go, but we haven't received that either.
In a speech after the Christchurch massacre, the Turkish president said visitors who expressed anti-Muslim views would be sent home in coffins like their Anzac grandfathers, but later claimed his words had been taken out of context. Historian Matt McLaughlin has been running tours to Gallipoli for years and says the relationship between Anzac pilgrims and local residents is still strong.
The sense you get when you come to Gallipoli is this shared experience with the local Turkish people, and so it's a world away from politicians making grand statements.
About 1,500 Australians and New Zealanders are expected to attend the dawn service in Anzac Cove. That's despite heightened concerns for security. The Turkish government has banned locals from attending, and only registered foreigners will be allowed in. But Matt McLaughlin says nothing else has changed.
The security is like it is every year here. It's very, very tight. The sites are fenced off, there's metal detectors, and there are police and military personnel fully armed everywhere you look. This is always going to be a very heavily policed event, and nothing is different this year.
The number of pilgrims travelling to Gallipoli for Anzac Day has declined following an attempted coup in Turkey in 2016 and a series of terrorist incidents. But he believes visitors' confidence is rising again.
Travel warnings were relaxed at the end of last year, so we haven't seen a big surge of people coming back to Gallipoli, but I'm fairly confident that in the coming years we'll see more and more people wanting to come here. It's just such an iconic destination.
Executive Director of the Australia Defence Association, Neil James, takes a more cautious view. He says Australians may not always be able to take their Anzac commemorations for granted under an increasingly autocratic Turkish government.
It's the Islamist nationalists who are now running the show, and I can actually foresee a time where we wouldn't have major ceremonies at Gallipoli anymore, because it just wouldn't be possible culturally and politically in Turkey. Every Australian going there needs to, be quite tactful and diplomatic and thankful, and realise that the Turkey they're visiting is different to the Turkey they visited 10 or 12 years ago, or 20 years ago, or 30 years ago. It's a completely different country to what it was only a very short time ago.
And that's the Australia Defence Association's Neil James, ending that report from Eleanor Whitehead. This year's Anzac Day commemorations do come during a fractious period in Australia's relationship with Turkey. A new documentary made by a Turkish filmmaker backs that up. It shows a degree of resentment among the Turkish people towards Australians visiting Gallipoli. But the filmmaker says he's frustrated the Australian War Memorial, which brought the movie last year, is yet to screen it. Evan Morgan-Graham reports.
The trailer to Turkish video artist Kokan Ogun's film Heroes features this song about a Turkish mother preparing her son for war. The accompanying video shows modern-day Turkish women weeping while watching a reenactment of young soldiers in battle.
I was using this art project as a tool to educate myself and to say, Köken, go and find out, why are people so patriotic? Why are people blindly nationalistic?
Köken Ergun's work looks at patriotism on both sides, Turkish and Australian. It features vision of Kontiki tour buses and young Australians wearing Anzac Day merchandise. It also includes shots of an Anzac guest book with slurs against visiting Australians written in Turkish. Some of them read,
"You came here, but your return was disastrous.
You're in my country now. Behave.
Don't ever think of invading us again.
You can't go around half naked among martyrs. Have some respect.
Infidels."
Köken Ergun says he was given assurances the Australian War Memorial would screen his film, and even recalls one of its directors giving him emphatic praise.
We did a screening in Canberra, but not in the War Memorial, in a separate space. And then he came up to me, this director. He said he loved the film. I said, "You sure you really love it?" He said, "Yes, I think this is a very important work for our collection."
But a year after the film was released, and despite co-commissioning it, Köken Ergun is frustrated the War Memorial is yet to screen it.
Maybe they're talking and then the art department wants to do it, but the other departments don't want to do it. I don't know.
In a statement, the Australian War Memorial said the film was screened at Artspace Sydney last May in conjunction with the memorial. But with more than 38,000 artworks in its collection, it isn't always able to display them straight away. Michael McKenna is a history professor at the University of Sydney and argues it's healthy for Australia to question stories linked to national identity.
Anzac Day is the primary national myth that Australia has to understand itself at the moment, and that has been one that's been encouraged, so much so that it's become almost sacrosanct.
But Professor McKenna believes the film is particularly pertinent, given the Turkish government's attempts to stir up nationalism.
If you go to Turkey, you'll see the way in which the government over the last decade or so has tried to cast the defence of Turkey through Gallipoli as a kind of victory for Islamic Turkey. I think it's crucial that the War Memorial shows that film, because that film, as we know, is one which is open to critical interpretations of the legend on both sides, on the Turkish side and on the Australian side.
And that's Sydney University Professor Michael McKenna ending Evan Morgan-Graham's report. More than 100 years since Anzac bonds were first forged at Gallipoli, there is a fresh push to allow New Zealanders to join the Australian Defence Force. But defence documents obtained by AM reveal broader government concern about so-called insider threat is one reason why the ADF is preventing young Kiwis from serving. Here's Defence correspondent Andrew Green.
Hundreds of thousands of New Zealanders call Australia home, but for many there's virtually no chance they'll ever be granted citizenship. A welfare crackdown introduced by the Howard government in 2001 means Kiwi arrivals are non-protected special visa holders ineligible for most social security benefits. And as non-citizens, it means they're blocked from the Defence Force.
It is time things changed.
Kevin Boville served in both the New Zealand and Australian armies, with deployments to Vietnam and Borneo. He's among a group of veterans from both sides of the Tasman who've argued unsuccessfully for years for special exemptions that would allow young Kiwis to enlist in Australia even if they're not citizens.
The Australian government and defence recruiting turn around and say, bugger off, you want to join the army, go to New Zealand. They place absolutely no value on the loyalty and commitment expressed by these young kids who are endeavouring to make a career in the ADF.
Now, internal Defence Department correspondence obtained by AM offers some insights into why. In an email sent last year, the head of Defence Recruiting wrote,
"The process and mechanisms for obtaining security clearances are now heavily reliant on an applicant holding Australian citizenship."
Adding,
"Citizenship remains a key criteria to enter the ADF, and permanent residents will only ever be forwarded to the services for a waiver decision when there are no other candidates with Australian citizenship."
In a reply, the head of the government's security vetting agency explains that given the wider government focus on mitigating the insider threat, all existing applications from non-Australian citizens have been withdrawn. 18-year-old Sarah is one Anzac hopeful who's been affected.
I went through and did a lot of my